What has God got to do with global warming, greenhouse gases, holes in the ozone layer? Terms that we hear about. Let's listen and find where God is present. We live in a world that has been created by God, and sometimes we forget about that. Here in Southern California, right outside the rectory where I am, every once in a while when the smog isn't very strong, I look up and I see a beautiful range of mountains with snow on it. And then even I can smell sometimes the grapefruit blossoms or the orange blossoms. I can walk in the grass, and I can see very, very beautiful things that God has made. But at the same time, I mentioned the smog as a thing that can cover the mountains. I know that there are things going on with our hunger for energy that are pulling us away from that understanding and awe of what God's gift is. I have a special guest that I'm going to explore this with. Jim, thank you so much for coming and being with us.
Thank you, Father.
God bless you. But you hear where I'm coming from? I'm aware of all of God has given us, and yet at the same time, we're living in a world that sometimes can be very, very disrespectful of the world in which we live. And one of the things is this big energy. Now, you're a chemical engineer. You're a doctor of a chemical engineer. You've given your life to using the world in which we live and improving it. Does that sound fair?
Well said. I appreciate it.
All right. And tell us a little bit about what is a chemical engineer. And here, I said this before, you're not a chemist.
No.
No, what's the difference? What's the difference?
Chemical engineers do things that are big. We make and design things like oil refineries or exploration projects for the oil industry. Chemists generally do things that are small.
Yeah.
Test tubes and experiments in the laboratory.
Like that. So you're working the big things. Now, tell me a little bit. Where were you raised?
I was raised in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
I grew up in a Catholic family.
Okay.
My parents were very concerned about education, so I went to Catholic grade school and a Catholic high school. And you asked me earlier about how did I become a chemical engineer. And Brother Yasho, when I was in high school.
In high school.
In high school. Was my chemistry teacher. And I said to him one day, do you think I would be a good chemical engineer? He thought about it and he said, try it. Just try it. Go ahead. Give it a shot.
Wow.
And all these years later, I look back and it was a good idea.
And it's just those kind of words, isn't it, that someone gives a little word of encouragement. I had a priest that way back in the 5th grade that said something positive about being a priest, and that kind of opened the door for me. Tell me a little bit about we're going to get into what you're doing as a chemical engineer, but could you tell us a little bit about your faith?
Sure.
A lot of times I think people are going to say, oh my gosh, a chemical engineer, and they're going to be awestruck. Was there a growth in your life? Was there an encounter with Christ that perhaps opened doors of being able to listen to his message and do it more effectively? Could you share a little of that for us?
It really is a gradual process in my life. Beginning when I was a child in my family and the faith in our family, and then when I married. And my wife is a very special person. And her understanding of our relationship really brought me closer to faith. So I'd say those two things together, my growth as a child and my family life as a married man.
So your relationship with your wife can open up an experience of Christ?
Oh, absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about that. What does that mean? I mean,
we've been blessed. We have 4 children. And the process of raising children, of understanding them and their needs, the relationships in the family, it's all a part of the bigger picture of Christ in our lives as I see it.
Wow.
And it's a part of the reason why I'm involved with the ecology and with things related to the environment. Because I think that there's a certain oneness. We've come to a point in our culture when we've used up just about everything we can use up.
Wow, isn't that true? Isn't that true?
We use the air, and we use the water, we use the land, we use the oil, we use the natural resources. And we've kind of transitioned now. We're becoming more unified because we're coming together to realize, well, not everybody drives a car and not everybody uses a cell phone. We all breathe air. We all drink the water.
Yes.
We all need the earth. So it's a great opportunity, as Christ called us to unity.
Wow, isn't that interesting? I like that, Jim. I like that very much. So what do you do? What does a chemical engineer do to take the earth and the world in which we live and somehow perhaps bring about a change, and again, in light with what Christ is saying? How do you do that?
Well, it's a process. About 10 years ago, I came to realize that as we've been looking for oil, and oil is our primary source of transportation fuel, we found the most oil in 1960. And ever since then, we've been finding less and less. But yet we continue to use more. So it's kind of a realization. We had to have something else.
And not only are we dealing with a situation of, and this is theologically speaking, not only are we dealing with a respect for the earth, but we're also dealing with political things that get involved in this, and that if our dependence on oil is dependence then on perhaps countries or nations where there might be compromises of our values, that becomes even another question. Are you with me on that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It has to do with stewardship, stewardship of the world, of the resources,
yes,
of the political environment. Energy does transcend the entire world.
Yes, it does.
And the aspects of the environment, the need to use energy frugally, really.
One of the things that we hear a lot, and I'm just reading in the newspaper this morning, there was 10 nations that came together, 10 states came together in their concern that about global warming. What is that? Is that indicative of this problem that we have with energy, that the world is, these North Pole and South Pole are starting to melt, and that because of that we might be having very serious problems in our world? Is that true? Or?
Global warming has two big parts to it. One is the political part. It's a factor that worries a lot of people. So politicians have taken it on as a cause célèbre. It's an important thing. And as a consequence of the political part, there was an accord reached in Kyoto, Japan, a number of years ago in the late 1990s, called the Kyoto Protocol. And it's a voluntary commitment by many countries to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas causing operations or activities in their society. Greenhouse gas typically is referred to as carbon dioxide.
Now, this is just a fact that as we're doing all of our stuff and we're driving cars and we're doing all the great things in our country, we're somehow letting off something that might be affecting the world in which we live in a bigger way than we understand. I'm a real layman on this.
Well, I'll try to summarize the technical part.
Yeah.
The technical side is, as you use energy, energy is normally in the form of a fossil fuel, coal, oil, or natural gas.
Okay.
Those things are in a cycle of millions of years.
Yeah.
They don't replace easily. So if you take energy from a fossil fuel, burn it, and make CO2 that goes in the atmosphere, it takes a long time for it to go back into a fossil fuel.
Oh, I never thought of that. Yeah.
Whereas if you have a shorter time cycle, say you have a plant or a tree, and you take the waste product from harvesting that tree, the wood waste, and maybe 30% of a tree in the forest is waste. If you're going to make a table, 30% of the tree doesn't become the table, it becomes waste. If you take that waste...
Really? Oh, interesting. Okay.
If you take the waste, convert it to a liquid transportation fuel, now, when that waste is consumed in combustion, the carbon dioxide can go back into another tree. So it's a much shorter time cycle.
Smaller thing? Okay.
So by shortening the time cycle, by using biorenewable sources of transportation fuel, we mitigate the problem of accumulations of CO2 in the atmosphere. So it's really about time. All the CO2 is the same. It's about how long it takes for it to go round and round.
So we need to start thinking a little bit more on the small plane if we're going to be able to continue our energy world in which we are. And it's good because we're able to travel, we're able to fly in cars, fly in planes, and not flying, but we're able to do things that are good, making the world smaller. but we've got to make sure that we're dealing with this energy thing and this burning of this fossil fuel in an effective way. You're talking about something, I know this is your business is going up to Canada, isn't it? You're trying to see what you can do with some of the wood that's around.
The wood waste.
That could be used
right.
for sources of energy.
We're working on one of the world's first plants to convert wood waste, the residue in the forest and in a sawmill, into biorenewable ethanol.
Wow.
Now, ethanol runs beautifully in cars. It's 110 octane, so it's a great fuel for motor cars. The wonderful part about it is it backs out the need for fossil fuel oil, and it's biorenewable, so it reduces carbon dioxide emissions.
On a quicker level. Oh, gosh.
Right.
Now, there are other things that we talk about. I've heard something about hydrogen, a way of making air and bringing it together in a way that's safe, because I guess it's very volatile. But could you explain a little bit about that we use air to...
Sure. Hydrogen is one of the many elements in the periodic table.
Okay.
Right? A Russian named Mendeleev came together with the understanding of the fundamentals of chemistry and physics, and he put together this table of molecules and atoms. Right? So these are all the atoms.
When did that happen?
Oh, back in the 19th century.
Okay.
So the understanding of hydrogen, it's the lightest of all the elements. And that means it floats very easily. That's the reason why, remember the von Hindenburg
yes.
dirigible? It was filled with hydrogen.
And it exploded.
It exploded. Hydrogen is extremely flammable. So hydrogen is a great fuel. When you burn hydrogen, combine it with oxygen from air, you make water. Pretty simple.
Yeah.
Hydrogen and oxygen is what water is made of.
Okay.
So hydrogen is an extremely clean fuel. The question is, where do you get it from?
Yes.
Now, most hydrogen is made from natural gas. So you're kind of in a trapped circle unless you have a biorenewable source for hydrogen.
Oh, I see.
So hydrogen in itself is a great fuel. The question is, how do you get it?
Oh.
And so making hydrogen from biorenewables, in fact, the process we're working on in Canada makes the wood waste into hydrogen, and then we make that hydrogen through another step in our process into ethanol.
Wow.
Ethanol is C2H5OH.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
You don't mean that, do you?
2 atoms of carbon, 6 atoms of hydrogen, and 1 atom of oxygen. That's ethanol.
Wow.
So it's mostly hydrogen.
Isn't that interesting? Now, let me ask you another question, and this is a question about atomic power. What's that all about, too? We're talking about energy, and we're hearing that
sure.
although we've had experiences of things that have gone wrong, there's a lot of talk that maybe one of the ways of the future of getting away from some of the smog and the problems of the what is it, the melting of the things,
the ice cap.
The ice cap could be done with atomic fuel. What about that? Is it possible to do that, and is it safe, or where do we go with that?
Well, of course, when you say atomic energy, people think of Chernobyl.
Yes,
They think of the terrible disasters.
Yes.
Not so bad, but here in the United States was a problem with a nuclear power plant called 3 Mile Island.
3 Mile Island, yes.
And I think the concerns of nuclear energy and the use of nuclear energy are well-founded. Our society has said to itself, we create nuclear waste in the process of making
That's
nuclear
the problem.
energy.
What do you do with the waste?
And it is a long-lived thing. Hundreds of thousands of years it's there. So it takes a perpetual care mechanism to monitor, control, protect, to keep it from the hands of people who would do harm with it.
I hear you.
A little bit of nuclear waste can do a lot of damage to a lot of people. So I think that's the challenge. Nuclear energy in and of itself is very clean. If the plant is built well, if it's maintained properly, and if the waste byproduct, the nuclear active waste, is properly cared for and stored. That's the challenge. What do we do for 5, 10, 50 generations into the future to properly maintain and control that nuclear waste?
Jim, tell me, what do you think you're a person of the big vision? Where are we going? How are we doing? Is there hope in our world that there are certain people that will talk of this gift of God that we've received with this world is just kind of slowly deteriorating? Is there hope? Is there hope that maybe we could continue even a level of the excitement of the energy that we're using and whatnot? but still...
I think there's beyond hope. I think this is a part of God's big vision.
Yes, yeah. I want to hear what God's vision is from a chemist.
From my perspective, right now, the natural resources of the earth are not very well distributed. If you look at a map of the world and look where crude oil and natural gas are located, very few places in the world with very few people control the majority of that resource.
It gets into our political question.
It's very, very political. One of the challenges is that for the world's economy to expand, for everybody in China, in India, in America,
yes,
to have an expectation that their children and their children's children will live better,
yes,
will have a better standard of living, they need energy to do that.
Yes.
There's an inextricable relationship, in fact, I've plotted the data, between the consumption of energy and the standard of living. If the energy consumption goes down, the standard of living goes down. So we need to maintain...
Well, that's an interesting statement.
Think about it.
Yeah, yeah. But go ahead.
So we need to maintain an ability to supply energy to the developing countries of the world. We in America actually are the most efficient users of energy.
Really? That's kind of surprising.
Per unit of gross domestic product, we use the least amount of energy of any country in the world.
Wow.
We're pretty efficient. But developing countries don't have the infrastructure we do. So they need energy, and they need energy to expand their economy, particularly China and India.
Yes.
So that's where I see this big vision of God. God put trees, God put growing green matter all over the world. It's not just in Oman or in Saudi Arabia,
yes,
or in Iran or Iraq.
Yes, yes.
It's where we live.
Yes.
There's green.
Yes, yes.
Now, the opportunity for us to convert green growing things where we live into the fuels and energy we need to expand our economy, I think that's the gift.
Isn't that fascinating? And there's also, along with that, isn't there are things like barley and corn and whatnot that might be used for?
Sure.
Is that another aspect of this whole thing?
Absolutely. Ethanol as a fuel has been around for many, many years, since the early part of the dawn of the automotive age. People have known ethanol as a good fuel.
Yes, I've heard that.
The challenge has been, where do you get it from? Now, historically, ethanol was developed because corn farmers in the United States and sugar farmers in Brazil needed a way to stabilize the commodity price of food commodities, sugar and corn. So the government of the United States and the government of Brazil said, let's subsidize the value of ethanol made from corn and sugar. Now, the motive was not to clean up the environment. Yeah. The motive was to help farmers. Keep the
balance of...
Yeah. It's a good motive. So consequently, here in the United States, this year we'll make 4 billion gallons of ethanol for motor fuel use from corn. It's a good thing. Yeah. It's the second largest fuel source in America for liquid transportation fuel.
You mean that actually goes into cars?
Oh, it absolutely does. Yeah.
What percent?
Not a big percent.
Yeah, what percentage?
Less than 2% of all motor gasoline is from corn. In fact, if we converted all the corn in the United States into ethanol, it would only make 8% of what we need for the gasoline we consume.
Okay.
So corn alone isn't enough of an answer. It's a good thing. It helps the farmers. But
Jim, this is really interesting. More. You got all the facts. That's fascinating. Well,
this is our business.
I know. Well, this is what's good. This is why I want to talk to you. So now, where are we going? You're seeing, along with corn, you're seeing this use of trees and the use of
I'd say wood waste.
Wood waste is the thing, the wood waste.
I think the proper balance is to take waste organic material. We'll call it corn stubble. That's the stalk that's left over. Or the remains when you do wheat processing. There's chaff.
Yeah.
Take that stuff that you can't use for much else. It's a source of carbon. And convert that carbon into ethanol. But the way we do that is pretty simple. We make steam like you boil water on the stove. We react the steam with the carbon in the biorenewable source like wood waste or corn stubble. And the result, over some catalyst, just like we do in an oil refinery. By the way, we're renaming our company. We're renaming it into Convergence Ethanol because of the convergence of oil refining technology and biorenewable raw materials. And that's our new vision for where this thing is going.
Wow. So that it comes together and it becomes a liquid that you can then...
We make a liquid. You know, ethanol, believe it or not, is what makes wine active. It's what separates wine from grape juice.
I need more chemical engineers in my life to understand the meaning of life.
Yeah, that's what ethanol really is, yeah. And so for that reason, when they make corn into ethanol, you make whiskey.
Wow.
You just denature it so you can't drink it. And you can put it in your gas tank. So that's another beautiful aspect of biorenewables. Ethanol biorenewable is not a danger to the environment. We drink it. It's a part of life.
Is it possible? Is it possible to let this happen? Or is there a possibility that the oil industry is going to be so dominant and so stifling of anything that you'd want to do that this vision that you have, which is really a vision of God that you're coming and saying and using what God has given us, can happen? Is there a danger that this can be just a dream?
Well, there's always a danger that things can change and you can't foresee the future.
Yes.
But I see that the oil industry really has a lot to gain. The oil industry has two fundamental problems. One is political, and the second one is a source of raw material. We're depleting the natural reserves in the world of crude oil.
Yes.
It's only a question of time until it's so expensive to produce that the industry can't support itself. They need an alternative. They're not in the oil business, really. They're in the fuels business.
Gotcha.
And the oil industry needs to look forward to what they're going to do after oil. Now, there's one oil company that's very visionary. Believe it or not, I used to work for them, as a matter of fact, but they were founded in two places, Chicago and in the UK, in England. And then now they've combined into what's called BP Amoco.
I've heard that.
Now, I don't know if you know this, but British Petroleum is where the BP comes from. But their new slogan for BP is Beyond Petroleum.
Ooh.
Now, think about that.
Yeah.
That's the direction we're talking about. I think there's an opportunity. The oil industry will realize it, that all we're doing in making ethanol is making it possible for them to still service the industry they do. We're not going to sell at a gas station. We're not in the liquid fuels business to the consumer. We're simply providing another raw material the oil company can use. Ethanol is 110 octane.
Wow.
It's a great fuel. Burns clean. It reduces emissions and pollution. It's the right combination of material, opportunity, and profit. The oil industry can still profit.
And we're going to be able to live in a world that's going to be much more insensitive, I think, to the gift that God has given us with our world.
I think so. Stewardship.
Stewardship.
The answer. Right.
We're going to come right back. Please listen to this message, and we're going to be back and have a little time of prayer. I'm going to be leading a pilgrimage to Mexico, and I'd love to have you come with me. I know that if you come with me, we're going to experience a deepening of our love for the Lord as we get very close to the beautiful spirituality of the people of Mexico. Mexico is a wonderful country. I've spent many months there, and I know that if you come with me, you're going to come away with a deeper love for our Lord Jesus Christ than you ever had before. And you're going to be able to meet so many new friends, not only those that are going to be part of this wonderful pilgrimage, but the people of Mexico in a rich, beautiful way. We're going to be flying to a place called Zacatecas. Isn't that exciting? It's filled with churches and wonderful chances for us to get very close to this spirituality that I'm talking about. Friends, Neo is a place where there's a wonderful devotion to the infant child Jesus. Then we're going to a place that I consider home whenever I go to Mexico. It's a place called Guanajuato. It's a state, and in that state is a wonderful city called San Miguel Allende. I spent many months there trying to learn Spanish, and I think if you come, you're going to wonder, why in heaven's name did I wait so long to come to wonderful, wonderful, new and alive Mexico? But we are going to cap off this wonderful time, not only in Zacatecas and Guanajuato, but we're going to go to Mexico City and be able to experience the power of the shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe and be with all of the people to share that wonderful time. This is a chance of a lifetime. Please join us. God is present because we are living in God's creation. That's what we believe, that this is God's gift to us, the earth on which we walk, the air we breathe. All those forces and gifts are a wonderful manifestation of God. Listen to this reading from the beginning of the book of Genesis. It's a wonderful account, just this little bit that I'm reading, of the wonderful act of God's creating the world in which we live. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, and it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day. Every time I hear that, my heart is just moved in great blessing with the reminder that we are living in God's creation. And you and I are living in the presence of God, whether it's in the mountains, the desert, the water. Maybe it's just the little garden you have in your backyard. Allow God to be present with you and move with reverence, move with sacredness as you enter in and live in the presence of God. Jim, thank you very much for sharing your gift and your enthusiasm and your hope with us, that what we receive from God can be something that we can be better stewards of. And, as you said in the beginning, this can really be a source of us coming together in the world, from Latin America to Asia to Africa, and we can be together. Let's pray for just a second. Lord, I ask you to bless Jim, and I ask you to please bless us. Give us the wisdom, give us the courage to use your world and to allow us to grow, to come closer and closer to you. And may Jesus' love for you always make you smile. God bless you. Thank you very much.